What's going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day wherever you're at. Whenever you're watching this, we're going to be checking out SCP-4612, Not All Gods Decompose, from the Exploring series. Links will be down below in the description. As always, to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the SCP, or to the Exploring series channel. So please do me a favor. If you enjoy this video, go over there, give it a like, check out his content. Makes a lot of great stuff for the SCP universe, 40K universe, and some other stuff, Star Wars, etc. So check out his content if you enjoy it, and you haven't already hit that sub button on his channel, definitely should, as he makes a lot of great content. If you'd like to join us as I'm doing this reactions live right now with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that they offer. So if you would like to take your support to the channel to the next level, you can go over there and check all that stuff out and see if any of that would have any interest for you. But regardless, thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to come in and hang out and watch the video. Hope you do enjoy it. So let's just jump into it. So again, this is SCP-4612, Not All Gods Decompose, by the Exploring series.
SCP-4612, Not All Gods Decompose. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote that God is dead and we have killed him. Nietzsche was speaking metaphorically, of course, of the regression of religion during the Age of Enlightenment, but it does raise a question. If humanity came into contact with an actual god, how long would it take before we killed it and investigated its body? SCP-4612 deals with this sort of question, as the Foundation finds the remains of an entity that seems to have been ritually killed many years ago.
I mean, it is a good question, right? Like, were we to actually come in contact with what we were to believe as God, and if we had the capability of actually killing it, would we? And what would the ramifications of that be? You know, like, would we kill it because we see it as a threat, or because it's not doing what we ask of it, you know? And then if we were to kill it, what would those ramifications be, right? Like, because a lot of people, I don't know if it's a lot of people. I myself kind of think of, like, God is almost kind of like the gateway to the afterlife, right? Like, you know, you got to go through, you know, Judgment Day and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, God's just kind of like the gateway to the afterlife kind of thing. So if we were to come in contact with what we were to believe would be our God and kill it, would we still have an afterlife? Would it disappear? What would happen to any of the souls that would be there, you know? And then, of course, on the scientific side of things, what would we learn? Would we learn anything? You know, I don't know. It also gets very into, like, Bloodborne, because those of you who have played Bloodborne or haven't played Bloodborne, that's kind of one of the major themes in Bloodborne is, you know, humanity playing with things and gods, and getting into stuff that they don't understand, and essentially kind of breaking the universe kind of a thing, you know? So I'm interested to see if that's kind of where some of the story goes, because Bloodborne is one of my favorite games of all time. And yeah, that would be kind of right up my alley for sure.
Let's take a look.
Is the whole canon where the SCP Foundation killed Death, and that went badly? I could see humanity trying to do the same thing given the option. Yeah.
SCP-4612 refers to two related anomalies. The first, 4612-A, being the body of a large, slug-like invertebrate, consisting of white, translucent flesh with elastic texture.
Already Bloodborne. Already Bloodborne. We're getting into cost territory over here.
The body shows no signs of decay, despite centuries having passed since its estimated time of death. It's 10 meters long, 1 meter wide, and lying atop a stone altar. Its anatomy includes 6 human arm-shaped structures measuring 3 meters in length, each terminating with a hand with 10 digits and a crystalline structure in the palm.
Interesting.
A flexible fin travels down the length of the body, and there is a lengthwise incision along its underside, performed after its death. Its blood is bright blue and uncoagulated, and the body emits considerable amounts of Akiva radiation, essentially a quantifiable energy connected to deific entities.
Interesting.
It has emitted a steady increase in this radiation for unknown reasons since it was discovered. The entity is housed in an underground structure beneath a provisional site located underneath the wine cellar of Eckert House in England. The door to the vault is inscribed with thaumaturgical glyphs, which, at one time, induced a mild cognitohazard, causing the viewer to ignore the entryway. The underground structure is constructed of stone blocks, many of which are charred and warped from heat. Cuneiform glyphs of unknown thaumaturgical purpose are etched onto the surface of many of them. The second anomaly, 4612-B, is a humanoid entity of average build with eyes that glow a bright blue. It has demonstrated the ability to manipulate thermal energy as well as anomalous strength far beyond what is expected given its height and build.
Interesting.
It has referred to 4612-A as its father, despite being...
We're literally, almost like we got Kos and the Orphan of Kos here, but in this situation, the Orphan of Kos, survived, and I guess had a more, actual human form.
Two distinct species. We're then given a memo from the director of the provisional site, Iona Varga, concerning the origins and significance of 4612-A. Through broad historical survey, numerous events categorized as a backsliding of technological capabilities have been identified. Many of these instances have grounded explanations by historians, but some do not. We're provided a short list of recorded appearances by the entity in the historical record, coinciding with such a technological cultural impediment. Around 2000 BCE, renditions of the entity were put on Sumerian pottery, inviting speculation related to the interference of the entity in Sumerian culture and raising questions about the end of that culture's dominance in the area. Around 1100 BCE, after the great conflict between the Mechanites and Sarkic in the Bronze Age Mediterranean area, most of the fabled technology of those who followed the broken god vanished, instead of affecting the progress of Bronze Age technologies. The entity matches the description.
That is something that I had always thought of, but I if the Mechanites and that whole ancient war were canon, right, there is a lot of ancient technology that you would think would have survived, right? I still need to finish Red Tape in the Red Tape canon. One of the major cities of the Mechanites, essentially teleports away into another pocket dimension. But there would have been other major cities of the Mechanites that fell, and there would have been other technology there. Now, I guess because, the Abominate is one of the, quote unquote, the Abominate and his forces are seemingly the main thing that wiped the Mechanites out. Maybe they went around and erased it in the Red Tape canon, but, collected it up, contained it, or destroyed it, whatever, because essentially it seems like the Abominate is actually of the SCP Foundation. But yeah, that was always kind of my question, and any other kind of SCP canon, right? Where did all that technology from the Mechanites go? Because there would have been some remnants of it, and maybe it's just a situation where it takes faith in Mechan in order to use it, or just so advanced that we haven't been able to reverse engineer it. Or I could even see some stories in the SCP universe of certain technologies that we have nowadays being reverse engineered from, found Mechanite technology or whatever that the Foundation has, or other, Marshall, Carter, and Dark, or whoever may have gotten their hands up. But anyway, let's continue.
Description of ancient scrolls, apparently written by a Mechanite priest, previously interpreted to be a mythical representation of Sarkic bioforms.
Interesting.
Around 200 BCE, the culture of the Davites vanished after being defeated by Chinese forces. Archaeological digs have revealed murals at a Davite ritual site dating to this period, depicting a creature that can be interpreted to be 4612-A, again raising the question of the entity's involvement with that culture's end. Recent historical documents originating in a monastery on Holy Island in England describe a demonic creature matching the entity's description, appearing in 412 CE.
I can
And
see
journal
that too, yeah.
entries found in a burial site from the 14th century in Sicily describe visitation of a spirit causing outbreaks of black plague in the surrounding area.
Oh,
The spirit described matches the appearance of 4612-A.
that'd be interesting. If this was some kind of like Davite deity of some sort, and yeah, it would be responsible for like the start of the Black Plague. That'd be interesting.
The entity was discovered on December 19th, 1986, while Foundation agents surveilled a known member of the Serpent's Hand, an anomalous group of interest dedicated to removing the veil between the normal world and anomalous. The agents followed the member onto the grounds of Eckert House and observed her performing an unknown thaumaturgical ritual to enter the door to the underground structure. The agents then pursued her and witnessed her kneeling before the remains and weeping. Upon seeing the
Very
entity, they
Bloodborne.
detained the person of interest and called for reinforcements. An MTF mobilized and arrived 8 hours later, accompanied by Agent Rebecca Douglas, a level 3 psychometrist, capable of experiencing associations, images, and other sensory information from touching an object.
Oh,
A survey of the site
Okay.
revealed no
We gotta
obvious
cow-cast this
anomalies
over here.
other than the cadaver of the entity, along with 23 corpses of human males of various ages surrounding it. Most of the
Interesting.
corpses were significantly desiccated, charred, and had skeletal structures partially incinerated. Several of them were dismembered due to blunt force trauma, and Agent Douglas noted substantial psychic trauma present in all human remains on site.
well, they did say the 614B or 2, whatever, the other humanoid version, you know, had like thermal controlling capabilities and was physically far more capable than what they should be for a person of their size. So it sounds like they probably might have been guarding the body, maybe, or, you know, who knows, but yeah, sounds like they'd be responsible for that.
We're provided an interview between Director Varga and the person of interest, several months after her apprehension. The individual appears disheveled and pale, and doesn't respond to Varga's questions about Eckert House and what she was doing there. Varga remarks that they can do this for weeks, as she belongs to what's little more
I
than
can
a
do this all
terrorist
day.
group, and they don't have the Geneva protocols here. Varga gets up to leave, but the individual finally speaks, saying that she doesn't know much anyways. She knows that the original master of the house was an occultist, and the house was named after him, she thinks. She ran across reference to his reaching out to the Wanderer's library and wanted to investigate. She didn't know what she would find. Varga asks how she found the sub-basement under the structure, as there's no record of it. The individual says that she surveyed the building and viewed the door by using a thaumaturgical working. Varga then asks if she knows what species the cadaver is, and the individual just asks in turn what species is a god. Varga
Good
asks
question.
if she really believes it to be a god, and the individual says that it was an alien entity that was ritually butchered, asking in turn what Varga would call it.
Again, this is sounding very Bloodborne, right? Because like in the lore of Bloodborne, like all of the Eldritch beings essentially are their own species. And the reason why they interact with humans is because they essentially can't have children without like killing themselves, or it's like an extremely great risk for them to try to have offspring. So they essentially use humans as like surrogates, right? And that's kind of like how some of the basis of the lore of Bloodborne goes. But then also the Church of Mensis, I believe, if I'm remembering my Bloodborne lore correctly, you know, they find a fishing village where an eldritch god being Kos was you know, having a child of its own, and they interfered with it, and I think it died through the process, and they tried to, I think, essentially create like a human hybrid situation. And yeah, everything kind of went bad from there. And then of course they tried to like hide what they did. So I don't know, but this is all again very much sounding Bloodborne-ish. It's making me want to replay Bloodborne, honestly.
Varga simply replies that it's an anomaly, causing the individual to shake her head and put her head on the table.
True, yeah. I mean, what would constitute a god? And I mean, that's kind of already been established in a lot of different SCP stories too, right? That like, given enough belief in something kind of makes it a god, right? Or at least creates it, right? You know, it's like, so, I mean, if you have this being that, well, it could have been, again, as they stated, right? It could have been like a Davite creation, right? Maybe the Davites had some kind of off-sect religion or whatever that believed in this entity enough to create it and make it, you know, what it is, or who knows, you know what I'm saying? So maybe at one point in time, it had enough belief into it to give it its power. And then once the Davites were destroyed, it kind of got cut off from that, and so was forgotten by history, kind of a thing. Maybe that's what happened.
Varga then asks what she's not telling them, as the librarians are supposed to be big supporters of the dissemination of knowledge. The individual says that she knows that the timing was important, and asks what happened here in the late 1770s. Varga looks at her notes and says that she's a geneticist and xenobiologist, but she remembers reading that the Industrial Revolution started in England around that time. She asks what that has to do with a non-terrestrial cadaver, and the individual just says that she doesn't know, but that she came here to find out. The occultist...
They able to, like, reverse engineer some things, or gain some kind of knowledge that led them to making... That led them to the Industrial Revolution, right? And to making certain mechanics, steam engines, things like that. But isn't that your idea is cool, the SCP concept for the future? Yeah.
Mentioned by the individual is believed to be William Henry Eckert, the initial owner and resident master of Eckert House. He was an active member in several occult societies and held regular meetings of such societies at his home. He made his fortune mining iron and copper, with local historians having theorized that he was investing in the burgeoning movement towards industrial revolution. Records from the Yorkshire Historical Society mention a meteor strike occurring on the evening of September 17, 1779, causing significant damage to the house, although the structure doesn't currently exhibit damage that would be caused by such an event. Eckert was last seen by his servants entering his library on the morning of the meteor strike and was considered dead after the incident. No mention of the underground structure or of the entity are made in the historical record, although local legends note that a man made of fire was seen walking out of the ruined house after the impact. We're provided a letter that was written by Eckert to a member of the occult society, retrieved in a raid upon a Serpent's Hand stronghold. It reads, 5th of May, 1779. Good Anthony, I hope this letter finds you well, my friend. I grow concerned with the others of our society. Our brethren must understand the grand scale of our endeavor. Any cost that comes forthwith will be well earned, whether in pecuniary losses or in our very blood. There is an inhuman entity that holds our lives in its grip. We have no choice but soil our hands if we wish our great empire to thrive. If we turn from this task, what will happen to future generations? The library has allowed our supervised review of many tomes, and I have recently found a ritual that was once used to bind a god, and should suffice for our noble purpose. Please, my dear friend and collaborator, speak with the others. Remind them of our sacrifices, and what we stand to gain. The consequences of our actions against our adversary will pale when compared to the great advances we can achieve for the human race. We must push on. Your friend, William Henry Eckert, Society of Yorkshire Thaumaturgy.
Interesting.
That certainly sounds like a letter we'd read in a horror game before seeing some really messed up stuff.
And yes, that's very Bloodborne-esque right there. That's essentially kind of what they were trying to do. You know, they were trying to make contact with these eldritch beings and, you know, learn from them.
Attempts to move the corpse of the entity proved to be unsuccessful, as it exhibits a density far beyond what would be expected, and it's estimated to weigh over 26,000 kilograms.
Wow.
The altar where it's lying is assessed as anomalous, given its ability to hold the body without losing structural integrity. Varga decides that attempting to move the corpse would not be nearly as cost-effective as testing on-site, so Provisional Site 91 is established. Small samples were surgically removed from it for ease of testing, showing that the entity has a cellular structure not matching any entries throughout the Foundation's biological database, and it seems to be based on a blending of carbon and silicon. The sample was exposed to electrical current of various charges, alpha, gamma, and ultraviolet radiations. It showed no change in its state, absorbing them and showing no signs of degradation or decay.
It kind of makes me think of this as has some kind of association with Meccan, right? Because, like, wouldn't you think that would kind of be what Meccan would be composed of? Would be some kind of being that combines both organic and silicon-based elements in itself, right? Both made of both carbon and, like, silica components. I don't know. Let's continue.
Visible wavelengths of light, as well as infrared, are not absorbed, but produce rippling motion in the structure of the fin running along its body. Residual energies exposed to the sample of flesh have been observed emitting from the crystalline structures present in its hands, and transmission of energies from the sample to the body occur instantaneously. It's theorized that the crystalline structures were used to conduct energies in an unknown process. The lengthwise incision along its body emits significantly higher Akiva radiation than the rest of the body, and the ritual or surgical procedure was apparently interrupted, as indicated by the bloodied palm prints along the length of its body. It's theorized that the corpse was to be used in a thaumaturgical ritual of unknown purpose. X-ray imaging of the corpse is impossible, as the remains absorb radiation, but ultrasound examination and portable MRI scans have shown a complete lack of internal organs. Its body is made up of fibrous muscle structures and a vast nervous system with nodules of unknown utility. Varga puts in a proposal to the O5 Council for experimentation using its genetic material, but approval is still pending.
Yeah, let's, do all kinds of crazy experimentation with its genetics and see what kind of crazy god creatures we can create. Again, like straight up Bloodborne, using the old blood. It's going to have great kind of healing properties with no side effects whatsoever.
Given the lack of information that physical testing has produced, Agent Douglas submitted a proposal to Varga to use psychometry to scan the remains. Varga agrees, and the two gather around the corpse to conduct the test. Douglas touches the corpse in silence for 2 minutes, before saying that it's faint She can feel something just under the surface, but something's blocking her. Varga suggests that maybe the event was too long ago for much to be left, but Douglas says that that isn't it, as there's enough psychic trauma in the stones of the hallway to give her a headache. She says she has an idea, though, and asks Varga if she's squeamish, before plunging both of her hands into the incision up to her elbows. Varga takes a sharp breath but doesn't say anything, and then Douglas screams. A psychic shockwave emits from the corpse, shattering the bulbs in temporary lighting set up around the chamber. Varga...
Yeah. Typical SCP stuff here. We don't know what to do, so it's just, do some random stuff that's going to turn out bad.
Activates 2 light sticks and asks what's happening, but Douglas doesn't respond, just slumping to her knees with her hands still inside the corpse. Varga asks again, but she's interrupted by a shimmering blue light emitting from the body as figures appear throughout the room, including a hooded individual identified as Eckert standing over the corpse. He's holding a knife in the air, chanting...
We're getting a visual representation of what happened when he found the corpse.
Loudly in garbled Aramaic, as the audio quality is poor and the chanting is indecipherable. He sinks the blade into the body, slicing along its length, and continues chanting as he slips one hand into the incision, overlaying himself onto Douglas's position. 20 or more other voices rise up from the other figures in the room, matching Eckert's chanting as he holds the knife up, covered in blue blood. The knife begins to glow a dull red as a bright light engulfs the room, and the structure shakes significantly. The ceiling crumbles inwards, and a beam of bright light illuminates the room momentarily. When it fades, a new individual, 4612-B, stands a few feet away, dressed in a long cloak and wearing a tricorn hat. He shouts at Eckert.
It's almost like, I want to say, right, like, did he transfer the being's consciousness into his own body? But it sounds like, before I pause there, that it's an actually separate entity. So did he somehow rebirth it in human form, doing this ritual?
Asking him what he's doing, causing Eckert to stumble backwards and drop the knife, asking what he is. 4612-B just tells him to step away from the body of his father, asking if murder wasn't enough for him that they had to desecrate his father's corpse. Eckert is sweating, turning to look at the other figures, but none support him. He says that he had no idea, and he didn't even know it was a he. The individual asks why he dissects his body, and Eckert just says that they wanted to use it for a ritual to produce miracles. The individual asks if this is his miracle, pointing to the corpse, and says that they killed the only living thing that truly knew him. Eckert tries to argue that it wasn't their intention, but he's interrupted by the individual stabbing him through the chest with his hand. A shower of blood and viscera splash onto the floor as the individual tears Eckert's body in two, both halves starting to smolder and burn as they fall to the stone floor.
Little Bishop action here.
He
from
looks
Alien.
down at the burning corpse for 30 seconds as the other figures start to scream, and some of them flee towards the exit. The individual looks up, his eyes shining, as one of the figures steps forward. He pleads that Eckert was the architect of this drama, and they had scarce knowledge of his father's existence.
So the thing is, though, right, like, I thought this Eckert person had found this creature down there already, right? Maybe it was in hibernation and they thought it was dead. So then they started doing this ritual and yeah, it ended up killing it, right? Maybe that's what happened. But I thought it was already dead. But I guess, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, maybe it was already in hibernation. Maybe it was kind of like what I was saying earlier, where like maybe it was worshipped by the Davites or some kind of offsect of the Davites, and then once they were destroyed, it lost that kind of belief in it to give it its power, its energy, or whatever, and so it eventually like ran out of juice and went into hibernation or something like that, you know? Um, and yeah, maybe I'm trying to think of like how the kid was made, right? The B variant, the humanoid version. Like maybe it was already pregnant from some other kind of ritual that the Davites did when this happened, you know, when it got cut off. And so maybe that's why it like disappeared for so many years. Maybe that's part of its process of giving birth, is it takes that long, you know, who knows? But obviously at some point in time it had a child of some sort, some kind of humanoid variant, and maybe it's just been in hibernation recovering from that sense, or I don't know. But yeah, it seemed like it was already dead, and they probably didn't know it, and they were trying to use the body, obviously, as you said, to do some kind of miracle, not realizing that it was still alive, and probably in the process of doing the ritual ended up killing it, kind of a thing. Right, exactly, as if it was somehow fine, right?
They only hoped to improve the lot of all mankind, and begs him for mercy. The individual pauses before stepping forward and placing his hand on the man's shoulder. He says that they wanted to achieve a goal, and so they have, but they didn't consider the consequences.
I mean, yeah.
The man's hair and skin ignite, his screams cut off by a strike of the individual's hand. He calls the others apes and tells them to come and show him their miracles. For the next 12 minutes, he kills each of the other 21 figures, using fire and blunt force trauma. After he's finished, he stands before the corpse of the entity before sinking to his knees, in the same space occupied by Douglas. The blue light from the entity fades along with his image, leaving the underground structure as it was before, and Douglas collapses. I'm sure I'm not the only one that imagined that scene as coming out of a dark anime. Douglas spent 5 weeks in recuperation, during which she was rarely conscious. A figure resembling 4612-B was seen entering her room on video surveillance 36 days after her collapse.
I mean, is the figure, I don't know. Because they said, right, like, originally at one point in time, a meteor struck the property, destroying the house, and a being of fire was seen walking out of it, right? So assuming that means that, like, maybe the entity was underneath the house where they made it, they didn't realize it, a meteor struck there, disturbing it. Maybe that's what originally killed it or whatever. And in its last death throes or whatever, the last energy it had, it saved the human there and turned him into what it is, you know, the B variant. Or is it a situation where, like, this is almost like a self-defense mechanism of this entity, and it's creating like a psychic image of itself as a human, and it just refers to it as, you know, its father? I don't know.
Security staff was mobilized, but there was no sign of him. When they approached Douglas, she was alert, but had a thumbprint on her forehead, just above the bridge of her nose, which was unable to be cleaned off by medical personnel. During debriefing,
Man tattooed her with a thumbprint.
She was asked to recount any discussion with the individual prior to the security staff's arrival. She reports that he claimed she was only alive because she was merely investigating. She also claimed to have significant interference with her psychometry, as all she could sense were the following words being repeated: Eckert died for a reason. The search for 4612-B is ongoing. Alright. So we have the corpse of an entity that the Foundation would typically classify as a deity in some form, that's been around for at least several thousand years. Historical records seem to show that this entity was perhaps responsible for regularly preventing humanity from advancing technologically. Eckert was aware of this entity and used a ritual obtained from the Wanderer's library to bind it amidst the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Eckert knew that the entity would have sabotaged the revolution in some way, and so set out to do a good thing, theoretically, killing it and using a ritual to control its power in some way. Where they went wrong, however, is not being aware of the god's son, who wasn't too happy about the situation, and who still seems to be kicking around in the modern day. While the ritual plan was perhaps a bit foolish and optimistic, it does seem like something the Foundation would do themselves in the admonition timeline.
Yeah.
Even still, the cultists had no real reverence for the fact that this thing was deific, and neither does the Foundation, with Varga treating it as an anomaly, like all the rest. I think that the Foundation, had they been aware of an entity that was responsible for sabotaging humanity's technological efforts on a large scale, would absolutely have contained it, possibly terminating it if need be. Obviously, this article ends on a bit of a cliffhanger, and that's because it's actually the first in an entire series of articles known as the Hekatonshires cycle, which delves further into the past of the entity and its son, as well as the future of Douglas and Varga. Perhaps I'll cover the rest of the series in full at a later date, but I think the article works well enough on its own. Most of the time, these sort of things go wrong during the ritual itself, but few expect for the god's kid to show up in the middle of it and Fist of the North Star you and your buddies.
No quote, I'm assuming? No quote, yeah. I miss the days where we got a quote. Well, there we go. That was SCP-4612, Not All Gods Decompose, from the Exploring series. Links, as always, down below in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. So if you enjoyed this video of his without my commentary and reaction, please go over there, give it a like, check out his channel. If you haven't hit that sub button on his channel, please do me a favor, show the man some love, hit that sub button, and give him some support. Interesting little tale. It definitely feels very Bloodborne. It feels very Bloodborne, or perhaps, if not straight from Bloodborne, inspired by, you know, Lovecraft, etc. It's an interesting idea, right? And it makes sense. Like, if you are a godlike entity, right, and you gain strength through human worship and them believing in you, you would want to probably hold them to a certain level of technology, advancement, etc. Because, I mean, as we see, you know, nowadays in modern times, as we're advancing more and more, at least in, you know, Western civilization, it seems like religion is taking more and more of a back seat in everyone's day-to-day lives. So it would make sense, you know, from a deity's perspective to, I don't know if necessarily keep control of humanity is the right term, but at least keep your, like, source of power, whatever the case may be, you know, that you would want to hold humanity back. And so somehow this guy Eckert learned that this entity was doing that and found a ritual to bind it, and whether or not he meant to actually kill it, ended up killing it. You would think, though, that right at that moment in time, where it would have been bound, or during the ritual of it being bound, that the B variation, its son, would have prevented that from the beginning, you know? So I'm a little curious about that, and more of what its motivation was to not prevent its father from being bound and or killed to begin with. Because it almost, again, seems to me like it's like a self-defense mechanism where when they were messing with the body to create whatever ritual it was, that's when the son was created, and the ritual never got finished because of that. So it almost felt like the corpse had some kind of like residual psychic self-defense mechanism to prevent it from being tampered with. And so like this, yeah, that like psychic image took humanoid form and was birthed then, and then, you know, yeah, killed Eckerd and everyone trying to do this ritual. And then the only reason why the Foundation member wasn't killed was because she was literally just witnessing what had happened, and she wasn't trying to do anything more with the body. Now, knowing the Foundation, of course, they're going to want to do more, and they even said in this document that they want to do genetic experiments with, you know, the DNA of this creature to see what it would be capable of. You know what I'm saying? So, like, yeah. But a cool little article, and apparently this is the first in a potential series, so hopefully it does follow up with more, because I would like to hear more and see where this goes, because these kinds of stories are always interesting. So Funny and a Stranger. Oh, this series with the author behind it, he has written some fantastic Sharky stuff. God created, if God is created from belief, how is the child created? The remaining belief? Yeah, that's the question, right? Maybe with God dying, the remains created a child. Perhaps, you know, maybe through the binding process it created the child, and it just, yeah, I don't know. That's kind of like, I guess, the big question from this is, how was this humanoid child created? Was it like a self-defense mechanism that happened from the ritual? Because from the description, it sounded like, you know, there was a beam of light that happened, and then all of a sudden the human body was, you know, the human child was there. So like, it's like he didn't get to finish the ritual because some kind of self-defense mechanism in the corpse triggered, and the child was created. You know, I don't know. It would also kind of make a certain kind of sense, because also, like I said, right, like if the child had been there all along, wouldn't it have kept its father from being bound to begin with? You know, I don't know. So, but yeah, that's the question, I guess, from this that I would like to know is where did the child really come from, etc. So, but yeah, great little story. Yeah, thanks for watching, guys. If you'd like to join us when I do these reactions live, as I am right now with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits and tiers that I have the offer. So if you'd like to take your sport to the next level, check those stuff out, see if any of that had any interest if you would like to become a member. Regardless though, just thanks for watching, guys. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and hang out and watch the video. If you're still watching here to the very end, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do so and watching the video all the way through. Consider leaving a like and a sub if you enjoyed this video of mine with my commentary and reaction. And yeah, hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We'll see you on the next one.